and welcome to Book Witches with a B, a podcast for book lovers. I am Orja,
And I'm Colleen.
and today we're going to be talking about chapters 21 through 25 of A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas.
We did want to give a little bit of a disclaimer for this episode. I think we mentioned it at the beginning that there is some explicit content or some spicy content, however you like to say it, in this book, and we are to that point in the book.
We are
So
solidly there.
we're solidly there. So it kind of starts a little bit in like this first chapter that I'm going to be talking about, and then it just kind of keeps ramping up from there.
Yes,
So.
we
Um,
will. So we are going to be talking in our chapter recaps. There's going to be a little bit of a hint of that, but we will have some deep dive sections, I think, where we go into that. We will put a disclaimer before those segments as well for those of you who do not want to consume that content. Time for our chapter recap.
Yes. Okay, so we open up with chapter 21, and right at the end of the last chapter, we have Feyre going, I've seen the most handsome man I've ever seen in my life. So I actually like bookmarked this because I like the way that Sarah like describes characters. And I also just didn't want to write it down. So literally the opening line of this is everything about the stranger radiated sensual grace and ease. High fae, no doubt. His short black hair gleamed like raven's feathers, offsetting his pale skin and blue eyes so deep they were violet, even in the firelight. They twinkled with amusement as he beheld me. Beautiful description.
Yes,
So that's
very
kind of like
descriptive.
it is. It's very like a Feyre description, I would say. She
Mhm.
talks about colors and like natural things. Um, so yeah, she talks to him, and she does also notice that he's not wearing a mask, so he must be from a different court. Also, to give some context, I know we ended the last chapter off, but we're kind of in this like spring festival called Calamai. And so there's a bunch of people kind of milling about, and there's been these drums that Feyre has been like drawn towards, and that's when she runs into the stranger and he saves her. And now that's where we're kind of at with all of that. So then this stranger asks her, um, basically, what are you doing out here? Why are you a human unaccompanied in the middle of the woods? And she lies and says that she came here with two friends and that they went off to get some refreshments. This makes the stranger chuckle, and she realizes that maybe that was not the right thing to say. So this person tries to like offer to escort her somewhere, and she was like, no. And then she specifically says that she took a risk in asking this, but she was like, I noticed you're not wearing a mask. Are you not part of the Spring Court? And he proudly proclaims that he is not of the Spring Court and that he would never want to be of the Spring Court. He seems a little offended by that. And then he says, tonight is the night that all the monsters are let out, and I can roam until dawn. So at that point, she decides, I don't want to be here anymore, and she runs away.
Fair.
And eventually runs into Lucian, who I really like this scene a lot.
Great scene.
He literally sees her, freaks out, picks her up, it says literally like a sack of potatoes, throws her over his shoulders, and then just walks away with her. He's like, I am not having it with you. I'm just going away. He is not happy that she was out there when they specifically told her to not. And he essentially goes, did no one explain to you what the Great Right was? They did not. I find it interesting that he assumed that somebody did.
You know what they say when you assume things.
Yeah, you're right. He's also been gone a lot, I think, in this time frame.
True.
So this is a little bit where some of the spicy content is going to start when we're talking about this. So the Great Rite is a fertility ceremony,
Yes.
essentially, I would say. Um, and so to make sure that the land is fertile, Tamlin lets this they call it like horrible and dark magic, essentially like consume his body, and he hunts a great white stag. And once that has been killed, he comes back and chooses a maiden. And Feyre then proceeds to ask Lucian, well, who's the maiden? And he says, well, did you see the line of women that were out there? And she said, yeah. And he goes, one of them. We don't know which one until Tamlin decides. Feyre does not like this news. She's a little upset about that. Lucian goes, I'm going to have to go find Tamlin because he is going to smell you and he's going to try to hunt for you. And she seems a little confused by this.
But also pleased.
Yeah, she's like, oh, he's going to come find me.
Ooh.
She's very confused about her like emotions for him, like throughout this, I would
Yeah.
say. Um, and you could tell that she was like, I mean, maybe I could go. And essentially, Lucian's explaining like he's not going to be Tamlin. Like he is consumed by this thing. He is a literal beast at this point. Like it's very animalistic. And they didn't want her around because of that. So they basically tell her to lock herself in her room and set up any sort of traps or whatever makes her feel comfortable. She also does ask that there was a lot of other males out there as well, and she was like, why is there so many men? And Lucian basically goes, yeah, essentially we get Tamlin's leftovers. Whoever he doesn't choose, we get to have. And it also helps like fertilize the ground and things, apparently. I actually don't know if that's true or if Lucian just says that that's actually what happens. I could see it being both ways.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, we don't know. She's not very like aware of magic, but I just think it's kind of funny that he's like, we get what he doesn't choose kind of situation. So she goes into her room, locks her door, sets up her snare, starts getting real anxious thinking about whatever Tamlin is doing in the woods. And she does hear the drums stop and realizes that probably means that the ritual has been
It's
completed.
over.
It's over. And she is upset by that fact. So she's like, I gotta busy my hands. So she takes her like snare apart. She's like, this isn't gonna stop any fairies. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And she realizes she hasn't eaten and she's upset. And honestly, same with me. When I'm upset, I want to eat. So she like storms out and goes and eats some food. And then she's walking to her painting room. And guess who she runs into? Yeah, so she runs into Big Tamlin. And he basically is like, what are you doing here? And she describes him having a voice that doesn't sound like his. It's very like animalistic and deep and things. And he essentially pins her against the wall. He takes her hands and pins her against the wall. And Feyre cannot decide how she feels about this. She
Fair.
is both a little mad and a little turned on, if we're being honest. And she like can't decide which one she is supposed to be. And then Tamlin goes on to explain to her that he could smell her and that he spent a very long time trying to find her. I did not say this. It had been about 4 hours from when Feyre had been into her bedroom from when the rite had done. So Feyre assumed that this whole action situation had been happening for 4 hours. I think we're learning here that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
He kept looking for Feyre and basically lost his mind. And when that happened, essentially the magic, as he put it, forced him to choose another person. So we don't know who he chose. I think he just grabbed a person. I'm not quite certain. He didn't really say.
I'm imagining he just like reached a hand out and like grabbed a female and like without looking at her stormed to the cave.
I agree. Like I don't think he really cared who
No.
it was at this point. He just wanted the whole thing to be over. And he describes that oh gosh, okay, we're getting into the spicy stuff here, ladies and gentlemen. But he essentially says that she did not want it lightly and that he did not give it to her lightly, and then proceeds to describe to Feyre that if it was her, he also would not have done it to her lightly and how much she would have enjoyed it. Which seems a little presumptuous to me
Yeah.
of his prowess, but you never know. So at this point, Feyre is literally like pinned against the wall and having him like whisper these things in this like animalistic tone in her ear, right? So she's having a lot of feelings about it at this point, so he lets her go. And yeah, she said she can't tell if she wants to strike him or caress him, which I feel like is a valid emotion.
Yeah.
At this point. And in very typical Feyre style, she gives him a very sassy response of essentially being like, don't tell, he like essentially says like, this is like, obey me. And she's like, gives a sassy response. So he once again grabs her, pins her against the wall, and then bites her neck like a vampire.
Yep.
He does not break skin. They do specify it is not a vampire bite, but essentially it's, it's the sensitive part of the neck. And he bites there and just kind of like uses it to pin her there. This is the point that she is actually losing her mind, which I think is very fair. And she does decide that slapping him is, in fact, the best action once he's done with all of this, and does slap him across the face. But after she does that, I think this was, I can't remember which of the sassy responses. I think it was when he told her, I think it's the second one where he's like, this is what happens when you don't obey me. And she's like, don't tell me what to do, and smacks him.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you're right.
which fair. I would do the same thing.
Yes.
This is kind of like the first instance, I think, where Feyre really settles in and it's just like, I really want this big beastie man. And she kind of like tells him that. This is also, oh gosh, okay, this is also the first instance where we figure out that females can smell arousal.
Oh my god.
Because she essentially like describes that, she's got things going on down there, and she could tell, and he sniffs the air and can smell it. And that is not the first time nor the last. I guess it's the first time. It's not the last time this will come up. So we know they have heightened senses. Apparently smell is one of those. And she can tell that he smells it, and then decides, you know what, I'm gonna go away, and just walks away. So that is the end of that chapter.
I would include that moment in the Farah is extremely smart segment if we had one, because she really handled herself well there, I think.
I agree. I don't really know what I would do, because like she's definitely like in the process of liking this person and is trying to figure it out, and like is clearly jealous, that this is happening, but like understands it's a Fae thing.
Yeah. A quote, very fairy ritual.
It is a very, very ritual. You were not wrong. So there's just like a lot going on with her at this point. So then we open with chapter 22. So going into this chapter, Feyre wakes up, and she has a bruise on her neck from him biting her. And, a lot of the servants and stuff were at this party, so they're not around. It seems like Alice maybe isn't there to help her get dressed. So she wakes up, bathes herself, I think puts on like a tunic and pants that she's been wearing, sees that she has this bruise on her neck, and eventually starts trying to look for scarves, and says, you know what? If he's going to act like a brute, then he's going to have to see what he did to me. And I appreciate that so much.
Yep.
This is the part where, like, this section of with Feyre, I'm like, yes. Love that she's standing up for herself in these ways. So she goes down to breakfast, where Lucian and Tamlin are. I guess it's probably more like the afternoon, but it's breakfast for all of them. Lucian, she like describes him as like falling asleep with his fork in his hand. He's like sitting up asleep, very tired. And she sits down, and he looks up and he goes, "Where'd you get that bruise, Feyre?" Because he knows that was not there when he dropped her off. So Feyre goes, "You explained to him, Tamlin," and he is essentially like, I mean, I can't be held accountable for this. She was out and about when she wasn't supposed to be. She does not like that he says he is not accountable. She takes offense to that and proceeds to tell him that he cornered her in the hallway like he was a wolf to a rabbit. Lucian found this extremely funny and is trying not to lose his mind at this point. And at this point, she also notices that I can't decide if Lucian is... I think he just thinks that like Tamlin clearly just like did not handle this well. Can't decide what he thinks is funny. But so then Tamlin starts giggling a little bit as well. And Feyre calls them fairy pigs and storms out of the room and proceeds to paint them as said fairy pigs, which I love.
I love that so much. I want to see one of those paintings.
I think that might be the favorite one of mine that she does. So she's, fuming. Apparently Lucian laughed at this so hard he almost fell out of his chair. Like he leaned back to laugh and almost fell over. Feyre was less amused. Clearly, she was still pretty upset. And then apparently there's just this little section, truly, where it's just like Tamlin comes and apologizes and gives her white roses from his family's garden. She's like, that's fine. I think she lets him off a little easy. We can talk about that more later.
Only reason that I would forgive him as well is because he clearly wasn't himself, literally. So yes. that's the only reason that I'm like, okay, fine.
I agree. This kind of, for some reason, well, not for some reason, I think at this point Feyre decides that she likes Tamlin and that she is gonna stay here and is gonna fit in. So she tells Alice to put her in a dress. Big deal. Why? I don't know, but it's a big deal in this section of the book. And so Alice is like, "Is this mean you're gonna wear them all the time?" And she said, "No, but I feel like for today, this is something I want to do." And I think Alice has talked about this before, but I'm not 100% certain. This is where we realize that Alice is from the summer court.
Yes.
I don't know if we've talked about that
No,
part
I
or
think
not
this
yet.
is the first time.
Okay, so like she did know that she came from another court, but she didn't know which one. We did know, I think, that her family was murdered, and that's why she left. And like
Mhm.
the remaining members of her family thought she was a little crazy for like running away and leaving, and she essentially said that she left so she could do what she could to help. It doesn't explain
What
what
that
that means.
means. Yeah.
She says, "I wanted to help," and Feyre, being Feyre, just goes, "Okay," and doesn't ask any follow up questions. so so she goes down in her dress, and Lucian finds, I think, the fakest excuse, so fake that Feyre notices that he has to leave because he's like, Feyre's in a dress, I'm gonna skedaddle, let her and Tim Tam hang out together. So Feyre sits down with them at dinner, and they're at these like really long, like grand dining tables. And she's like, "You're just so far away, Tamlin." And he like waves his hand as he does, and like shrinks, like essentially like shrinks the table and like brings her closer. And he's like, "How do you do that?" And he goes, "Oh, well, it's essentially like a broom closet, like a little pocket between worlds that is just kind of chilling in." And once again, she really doesn't ask any more questions about that.
I
She
have that
just
starred in my notes, so we will get into that as well.
she does proceed to be like, "You could have just, moved closer to me." And he was like, "Well, I want to show off for a beautiful girl." And she's like, "I am beautiful." Like she's like, "I feel beautiful and feminine and all those things." And it's like definitely very apparent that he's like kind of trying to show off, but it does seem like his hand is hurting, like doing that. Interestingly, seems like it took a lot of magic, like more than lighting the candles and some of the other things that he's done. So in this next section, Feyre finally decides to take him to see her paintings, which I don't think I processed that they hadn't seen yet. I guess she like asked Alice for a key to the room and has kept it locked the whole
Mhm.
time, so no one can see it. And so she takes him in there and is trying to like show him all these different paintings, and she's trying to show him the one that she made of like them in the meadow with like the starry lake, and she's like trying to explain to him that like, "Oh, this is what these are." And he goes, "Oh, I can tell, like I know what these are, I can see her artistry." And she's only planning on showing him like the ones of essentially her like in the Fae court, but he starts looking at her other ones and sees it's actually her like painting through her life and her cottage and the forest. There's one of her in the winter hunting in the forest, and, like what that forest looks like, and different things. And she's like, "Oh, well, don't look at those." So there's also one of her having sex with Isaac Hale,
Yep.
and then it's like an artistic interpretation.
Right. It's
She
it's not an
does
explicit painting. It's like just like his hand fisted in her hair in the hay.
in the hay, and there's some like it's I mean it's apparent what's happening.
Oh yeah.
And she does notice that Tamlin gets a little jealous, so that makes her feel a little bit better. She's like, "Okay, it's not just me that's feeling this." He gets a little upset. And different things. I know it doesn't state this, but I think at this point he has to find the fairy pig one, right?
He must. He probably
They don't
just
they don't address it. Maybe she hid it better, but I feel like he had to see it and just ignored it. So he's seeing all of these paintings, and she like is trying to give him the one of in the meadow, and he says, "I want this one," and it's the one of like the really rough, like bleak landscape of what she used to hunt in. And she's like, "I just don't understand." And like she's like looking at this gorgeous man, right, who has just complimented her. She's in a pretty dress, and she just like looks at him, and she's like, "I want to see his face so badly." So she begs him and is like, "Please, like, what can I do to help with this mask? Like, I can tell something is going on. I want to help." And he proceeds to tell her that it's his burden and that she would not survive the dangers that he is in. I literally put a bit dramatic. Like I think that's one of the things I like tab marked and literally go drama queen next to
yes.
it. But I also understand that we don't know what it is. So I mean, he definitely is taking on some pretty intense fairies. Although she did kill two of the Naga by herself, so I feel like she might be more capable than maybe he seems to think. But we don't know. Um,
Mhm.
and then she's like, "Well, am I a distraction? Do I need to leave? Like, I don't understand. It's like, what can I do to help? I don't want to just stay here and not know what's going on." And he explains that when she first came, he really did consider sending her away to somewhere he thought she might be more safe. away from kind of, the hustle and bustle of all of the court stuff. But eventually he decided that he just wants to know that she is safe in painting. And so she was like, okay. And she's like, well, why do you want this painting? And he said, Feyre, I've been with a lot of women. Bit of a weird brag, but like, okay. He's like, I've been with a lot of women and they're all noble women and all these things. But one thing they don't have in common is that they didn't understand the darkness. This is the most Edward Cullen line I have ever heard in my life. I'm going to let you know. When I read this, it's all I could think of. He's like, I am the darkness kind of thing. He's like, like they don't understand the darkness, but like when I see this painting, I understand that you get it and that you understand the darkness in me. And I once again put honestly so dramatic. So that's essentially how the chapter ends, is with Tamlin just being a bit of a dramatic boy, and we go into chapter 23. So we open this chapter with Feyre and Tamlin in a beautiful grassy glen. And they're sitting under this like really pretty willow tree, and like Feyre even notices, she's like, yeah, like this isn't like rainbow waterfalls and like starlit seas. Like this just seems to be kind of as normal as the Fey realm can be kind of place. And Tamlin makes a comment that he's like, oh well, the willow tree singing always puts me to sleep. And Feyre goes, what do you mean?
Huh?
She has to think he's crazy at this point, right? She has to think he's hearing things. She's like, what do you mean the tree sings? And he said, well, you can't hear it because of your humanness, essentially. Like it's put a damper. I have some thoughts on this, but we can talk about it in a minute. It's put a damper on your senses, essentially. And he's like, do you want to see it the way that I see it, the way that Faye see it? And she's like, yeah. And he goes, well, to do it, you have to give me a kiss. I will say for Tamlin, this is pretty sly. This is pretty flirtatious for him. Like I give him a few props for this.
Yeah,
and she's like, I won't do that. And he proceeds to be like, well, I'm a high lord and I don't do anything for free, so give me a kiss. And she just like essentially like in my head, I think she like harumps. She's like, fine. And so she like puts her hands like in the grass, which I thought was interesting. She's like clutching the grass to like brace herself, which I thought was a bit of an intense description. Essentially, he tells her to close her eyes. So she does. And instead of kissing her mouth, he kisses her eyelids.
Yes, horrified. I would be horrified.
I would be like, anywho, apparently he did this to lift the glamour. Makes sense. Seems a little literal when every other fairy magic thing that he's done, he's just waved his hand and it's been gone. I don't know if he's weakened and he's having to do more physical contact. I think he just wanted to kiss her.
I think he was, yeah. I think he was
He thought
being
that
a
was
player.
sly. Men, if you're listening to this, or women, or whoever you want to kiss, don't kiss people's eyelids.
No, please don't. Or if you are going to, warn me. Warn us.
Yeah, maybe have prior consent and talk about it. Maybe. I did say it seems like he's finally being flirty in my notes, so I'm going to give him some credit for trying. And when he's doing that, she suddenly hears this like orchestra music thing. She's like, oh, the birds. She described them as sounds like they were gossiping, which I thought was really interesting. Like the birds were like gossiping back and forth, and the willow tree was having this like beautiful, mournful song. And she also makes mention of this, which I don't remember this when I read it the first time, is that magic no longer smells metallic to her.
Yes.
It now smells like a rich, like wonderful bouquet of flowers. And so she finally opens her eyes and looks around, and it's, this like beautiful like river of like rainbows and all the stuff. And then she looks at Tamlin, and by gosh, did he get even more attractive. She goes into like a pretty detailed description of where he like literally like is radiant and glowing, and how his eyes are like not just green, they're like these multiple dimensional shades of green. And she's just like, I have to see this man's face. I must know his beauty. So she tries to like touch the mask. It doesn't move. And at this point, Tamlin decides to put the damper back on himself. Everything else she can still see. But the damper went back on himself, and she said, well, why did you do that? And he said, well, it just kind of makes me more normal to like everyone. Essentially, like, this is one of the markers that I'm a High Lord. Like, that's why my brothers knew that I was the one that was probably going to take over this power. It's very apparent. And so he was like, well, are you going to fulfill your end of the bargain? You still have to kiss me. And then my favorite Pharaoh move, I actually think she takes his hand and kisses the back of his hand to fulfill her bargain.
Go Feyre.
We love that for her. And that's the end of chapter 23. Okay, and now we're going to roll into chapter 24. So, like, they go back, they're in the castle. Feyre wakes up and sees a woman with tree bark skin in her room. She, of course, is very much like, I haven't seen a woman with tree bark skin. Who is this? Just a little side note for anyone who watches Lord of the Rings. I cannot picture anything else but the Ents, like the little walking tree people, when Alice is described. And I know that's not accurate, but that's all I can think of. So she's very confused. She's like, where's Alice? She must not be working today. And this woman looks at her and goes, I am Alice. And she's like, no, you're not. The person I know is Alice. Is essentially, she goes round, plump, and looks like a high fae. And Alice, this is when she realizes that Tamlin glamored everything.
Everyone, yeah, everything.
And she's like really confused, and Alice is like, this is what I've always looked like. And then she starts walking the hallways and starts seeing so many people. She looks up in the garden. There's people in the garden with like bug masks on, like pruning the gardens, and she's walking through the hallways, and she notices some people that look high fae and some people that don't. And she did say that she noticed that she like started averting her gaze from those that don't look high fae, because they seem the most surprised that she has their attention.
At
So
this
she
point in my notes, literally just wrote, Alice, fairies everywhere. Ah!
that would be truly terrifying to wake up to, right? I think also at this point, just a little side note, I think we can probably understand that the two little ghost children that we saw were just children that were glamored, that just kind of happened to break through the glamour, which is terrifying, by the way. So she like essentially like storms into the breakfast area where Lucian and Tamlin are, and she was essentially like mortified at this point, and she was like, oh, when did all of these people show up? Like, and they're like, they've literally been here the whole time.
The whole time.
Tamlin seems very amused by this.
Don't get me started.
Lucian is also amused, but I can't decide if Lucian. I think Lucian is not amused about the fact that it's been glamored. He knows about it. I think he's amused at Tamlin's sheer lack of smoothness, because at one point he looks at her and was like, hey, Feyre, if I gave you the moon on a string, would you kiss me too? Which I love dearly.
Yes, the answer is
could
yes.
also be, you can kiss me anytime you want, Lucian. So this is also when Feyre realizes, well, there's a combo of things. I think she realizes, one of them, she definitely realizes that when she thought she was sneaking out of the castle to go towards the puka, there were so many people.
Everyone could see her.
Everyone could see her. She thought she was alone. She wasn't even close. There were so many people around. This also makes, in my brain, make more sense. Like, I know Tamlin's magic is strong, right? There's people that just told him she was doing what she was doing. There's just so many more people than she thought was around. But they do talk about that there's definitely been like a surge in the blight at this point. Like, there's more that's coming, more that's happening, and this seems to be a big concern for Tamlin and Lucian. So then the next day, Feyre decides she's going to go to the garden to paint. And she finds a high fae male's head stuck on a rock. It seems very fresh and very grotesque. So she, of course, drops all of her paints, as you would, and tries to step back a little bit to get out of the way, and runs into Tamlin and Lucian. And they talk about how they don't recognize this person, so they're not of either the Autumn or the Spring Court. But what they did find was a branded sigil of the Night Court behind his ear. And Feyre was like, of course, traumatized, like trying to figure out like what that means. And so they proceed to essentially tell her that the Night Court is like the worst court, and their High Lord is like the worst to ever exist, and that they find things like this very amusing. Like, this was like a fun game to them to do this to people. And Feyre's like, is this just a game? Like, it seems extreme for just a game. Is it a warning? And they said it's both. It's essentially them showing that the blight is surging again, and that the wards are weakening, and that they can like sneak onto our land and like clearly kill this person pretty close to our borders without us knowing. So she definitely is feeling frightful, But then like they re-emphasize the serial's words of like just stay with the High Lord and you'll be fine. So she's like that's kind of like her comforting like driving force
Yeah.
at this point. So then I think it's around the same time frame, like a little bit later around the same time frame, not certain. Um, Feyre and Tamlin start talking about when, because Tamlin remembers when, faintly, he said he was pretty
Mhm.
young when there were human slaves on the land and how his dad was not happy about giving them up. And essentially, and she was like, oh wow, yeah, like 500 years probably isn't enough time to erase that they were here. And she was kind of thinking, like, I wonder if I'll find traces of my people here and like what they went through and different things. And he was like, yeah, I remember them leaving. And she asked and said, were they happy about leaving? And he said they were, but there was also a lot that they had to overcome because they didn't know seasons. They had lived in these seasonal courts. They didn't know how to handle seasons or really how to survive outside of the enslavement that they had been in. So they had a lot of challenges to face. But she does realize, like, the end of the chapter, the last line is she could not bring herself to paint.
Yeah.
Like, after, like, the day that she's had, fair enough, she just can't paint. So we roll into the last chapter of this section, chapter 25. So Tim Tam is called away, and he does send word back with Lucian that he's going to be gone. And Feyre's like, oh, wow. Like, and he's staying, like, overnight. Like, he's never left the manor and stayed away any longer than that since then. And she's like, wow, like, he must, like, really care for me if he's, like, telling me this. But she's also very anxious
Mhm.
for him, especially because Lucian's like, I promise he's alive. And she's like, why did you specify that so hard?
Right. It kind of calls back to when, like, in the beginning where she kept on being like, he said I could live in Prithian, but what does he mean by live in Prithian? It's like that same, like, foreboding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if someone like came and told me like they're staying overnight and they were like weirdly emphasizing that they're alive, I'm like, are they injured? Are they hurt? Were they not supposed to be
Right.
alive? Like, there's a lot of
Mhm.
questions. It does seem like that Feyre asks once again, none of them. That or Lucian just didn't explain. I don't know which one. I guess we don't know if like Lucian sent a letter or if he came back. It seems like maybe it was a letter
I don't
potentially.
remember. Yeah.
Because she does say that like Lucian and Tamlin appear and she hears them, so I'm thinking maybe it's like a
A
letter.
letter, yeah.
Don't know why Tamlin didn't write his own letter if that's the case.
He's a High Lord.
Yes. Tamlin sent this message back to Feyre. She feels really flattered and like also worried, so she doesn't sleep really well. This is also when she's like, I might like him a bit more than I probably should. And she's like, I think she puts it more like, my mortal heart will be in pieces, which is also very dramatic, Feyre.
Yes.
But so then she realizes that they're decorating for the summer festival. I did not write down the name of it. I
I think it's
apologize.
just summer solstice.
Yeah, the summer solstice. And she, in this time frame, is like, wow, like, does my family still think I'm gone away to see this aunt? Like, it's summer now, and she left in winter. So, I
Mhm.
mean, they're almost like a full cycle around kind of thing. So she's feeling a little sad about that. But she can tell that, like, all the decorations that are going up because she can see everybody now. Um, if you
Imagine
can't
that.
tell, I'm upset about it. I'm upset that she can see people. I said that she couldn't before. Um, but this is going to be a lot more spirited and grand and just like seems like maybe like a happier ceremony
Mhm.
in general. And she's, painting in her room. And she hears Lucian and Tamlin's voices, and she gets so excited she runs out to greet them, and Alice absolutely snatches her up before she sees them. And it's like, no, ma'am, you were putting on a pretty dress. That's what she describes.
Mhm.
Puts on this really beautiful cornflower blue dress and puts some, like, leaves her hair down, long and luscious and beautiful, and puts some stuff in her hair. And Feyre, like, comments on, I think kind of as a passage of time thing, but how she thought that this dress would make her look childish. But as she's been here, she's like filled out and had like a woman's body now. She feels more like a woman and feels more confident and comfortable in herself. So she comes out, and I love Lucian dearly. He essentially like whistles at her and goes, "Wow, you look positively fey."
Yep.
He is like, "Wow, waza waza." Um, and to be honest with you, she doesn't respond because she is too busy looking at Tamlin. Why? I don't know. Lucian's right there, but
Come
that's
on.
not the
Come
point.
on, Farah.
Um, she's scanning him for injuries. She's concerned. He seems fine. He doesn't seem dirty. He seems very clean. They both have this weird thing about being clean.
Yeah.
This is similar to what Tamlin had mentioned to her. And he just looks at her and goes, "You look beautiful." Feyre, I like Lucian's answer better, but that's also very cute.
Mhm.
And so she decides that she's like, okay, well, I'm surprised I get to participate this time because she is still not real happy about not being able to participate in the spring rite. Um, and Lucian, being sassy right back, basically says, lucky for your neck, this is just a normal party, which I love dearly.
Ah, Lucian.
Um, so they eventually, walk out to the party. Feyre, they kind of like walk off and do their own thing. And so she's like, what all socially awkward people do. She goes and finds the food. It like describes she's eating all this wonderful like food and tarts and stuff. And she said it's pretty similar. This is one of the few like holidays they celebrated in the mortal realm. Nothing religious necessarily connected to it, but people would get together, eat cakes and things as like a break from the harvesting and plowing and stuff. And she's like, I need a drink. So she goes to get the wine, and Lucian's like, absolutely not. You are not drinking that. Like, he's in my head, just appears out of nowhere.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's just like, absolutely not doing
100%.
that. And she's like, I'm tired of people telling me what to do. I want to drink it. And he was like, that is fairy wine, particularly on the solstice, which I'm assuming that must mean the magic is stronger. He didn't really specify. Um, don't do that. Tamlin will gut me. Quote, Tamlin will gut me if I let you drink that.
Mhm.
And Farah just makes eye contact with him and chugs it before he can get it out of her hand.
What a queen.
I love her so much. So of course, he calls her a mortal fool. Um, and she also notices, oh, I'm actually going to read this section because his glamour lifts, and this is truly just for me, because his glamour lifts, and she gives a very like interesting description. I can't
Interesting.
decide if they're saying that Lucian is glamoring himself or if Tamlin is also glamoring him. It's hard to tell. But like when she drinks this, essentially like his glamour is lifted for a little bit. And it says his auburn hair burned like hot metal and his russet eyes smoldered like the bottomless forge. She goes, that is what I want to capture next. And she proceeds to tell him that she wants to paint him. Just saying, she hasn't said she wanted to paint Tamlin except to paint him as a pig.
This is
So,
true.
as far as we know, I'm sure she probably has painted him, but she hasn't told him.
Also, like, she's
Um,
like, Farah is like tipsy and she's like, I want to paint you. Like,
like, Lucian's like looking at this like drunk, human girl and being like, she thinks I'm hot, but you're supposed to date my friend. Tamlin is going to kill me. Like, I think that's more what he meant. He's like, I know I'm hot enough that I'm gonna distract
yeah.
from Tamlin. So she starts giggling, just absolutely giddy giggling, and she's like, I don't giggle. And then she hears music and it's like, I gotta go find this. I have to dance like every drunk girl
Yeah.
ever.
True.
You hear music and you must dance. She's living the true feminine experience.
Farah is all of
Um,
us.
so she like starts basically running off. She's a runner.
Mhm.
And Lucian is like, get back here. Like, you cannot just run away. So he's like chasing after her. And she gets to where like they're on the stage and playing and she starts, dancing around a little bit. I don't know if anyone else is dancing at this point. I don't think so.
I like to
I,
imagine not.
I also like to imagine that. So there's this like human girl, to them probably awkwardly running, like stumbling over herself, and then just starts doing like, the white girl wiggly dance. That's what I think she's doing. Because that's what I do. Um, but she's there and she's like looks up and she sees this very handsome fiddle player and she's like, wow. She like specifically describes his neck, which I thought was a really interesting detail. Like his like chin and neck like rest on the fiddle. It's Tamlin. Apparently Tamlin plays a mean fiddle, like
Yes.
fiddle man. And he sees Feyre, and he just thinks it's fun and decides to like dance the night away with her, also kissing her a lot.
Yes.
He's very much up in her business, like, kissing on her, loving up on her kind of situation. Um, and they talk about like the will o' the wisp and like all of these like magical things that seem really fun. And he decides that they're gonna go in a true dude move, he's gonna take her away to a relaxing grassy patch of land away from the rest of the party. It's a weird guy move. He wants to get her alone in a comfortable spot. And so they like, sit down next to each other and like do some like cuddling. Her head's on his chest. It's cute. They finally actually kiss at this point. We
Yes.
finally get them kissing. Uh, and she's just like really happy. Like she tells Tamlin that her dad always used to tell her that she should let her sisters hope, and she never really thought that was possible.
Hmm.
That there wasn't anything better, but now she's realizing maybe something was, which I think is really sweet
I know,
and like
so
tender.
sweet.
And the chapter ends with Feyre saying it was the happiest moment of her life. And that's the end of the
Yeah,
chapters.
that's the end. Oh, that part was so sweet.
It was very tender.
It was very tender. And just like imagining with like the sunrise and, feeling like a new day is dawning in her life and also literally so sweet. All
Yeah.
right. Time for
So
our chapter superlative segment. Superlative number one, drama queen of the section, Tamlin.
it has to be Tamlin. I think Tamlin and Feyre might be tied a little bit, but Tamlin is just so much more like the darkness has overcome me.
Yeah. He he's so dramatic. Like honestly, I think that Feyre, I mean, she has her like dramatic moments, but most of what happens in this section of chapters happens to her. And so
Yes.
her like reactions, while some might be a little dramatic, I'm like I mean, I would probably be that amount of dramatic for most of them as well.
Yeah.
But
She
like,
has not slapped Tamlin nearly enough.
yeah, agreed. But like Tamlin is just drama queen of the century.
That does not change, by the way, for anyone who has not read this. It just continues
Continues.
and gets worse.
Continues. Wildest thing to happen this segment.
I would say realizing that there are so many people
Yeah.
that live there with her.
Yeah, like just picture this, okay? So yeah, so we get her thinking about like the puka when she's like running out. I'm thinking about her like sneaking around earlier, like marking down a paper for
Mm-hmm.
her map, and it's just people being like like what is this human doing? And then like the moment in the kitchen where she's sneaking out to get cookies and then Tamlin corners her and bites her. Were there other people in the kitchen?
I would say 100. Well, maybe not. They were probably all in the festival because the servants were supposed to be there.
That's fair.
So, I
I hope
think that
not.
Tamlin would have made them leave. I think maybe not though. He was really singularly focused.
He was.
But
I just like, could you imagine like a stray like fairy servant who like stumbled in to grab some food too, maybe, and like just like witnessing. Oh my God.
yeah, you would be like, I saw nothing, and I don't want to die.
Yeah. Or please kill me now. It'll be fine.
One of the two, definitely.
I was so mad on Farah's behalf. And then like I understand why Tamlin and Lucian were amused, but at the very same time, I'm so mad at them for not, I don't like apologizing. Like,
So that whole thing, that's what I could not decide, and that's what I was trying to debate whether. So like Tamlin definitely seemed amused and thought it was funny that she was like bumbling around.
mhm.
But like when she talks about Lucian being amused, it's post his like if you gave me the moon on the string. So I can't decide if I think he was a little bit amused by like her because he just like he's amused by humans. Like he
Yes.
doesn't understand them, I feel like, at all. I'm assuming he was too young to even remember. Because I mean, if Tamlin's barely remembers human slaves,
Yeah.
he probably hasn't been around a lot of humans. I am not saying that he shouldn't have left her in that moment. I would have also called them fairy pigs. Although I do think if someone called me dramatically a pig and then stormed out, I would also probably lose my mind.
Yeah. I that's pretty hilarious. Pretty
Yeah.
hilarious.
But no,
Um
I agree. I am upset wholeheartedly for her. It is, yeah.
so welcome to our deep dive section. I am so excited about this chapter or this segment of chapters because we get so much more about Prithian and like the customs and the festivals and stuff. And
Yeah.
I looked up I looked up different, like, spring equinox is essentially what
Mhm.
Fire Night Calanmai is.
Yeah.
Calanmai?
I think it's calamai.
I think it's
I think.
Calanmai,
Yeah,
right? We're
I think
calling
so.
it Calanmai now. Um, so especially yeah, that because there's actually just like spring equinox, there's so many
Mhm.
different celebrations around the world for spring
Yeah.
equinox. So I looked up some of the cultural traditions celebrating spring equinox out there, and two really came to mind. There we go.
Mhm.
First, okay, so it's called Fire Night, right?
Mhm.
And Tamlin, I don't know if we mentioned this in the chapter recap, but Tamlin has been painted. And so Farah can see the finger, she can see where the paint has been disturbed, and she's very disgruntled about how far down it goes. But
I forgot about that.
right.
Yes.
So, and then just the whole thing with like the bonfire and the drums and stuff. So in Hinduism, the spring equinox
Mm.
celebration is Holi, Holi,
Ooh.
and it's most well known for it's like the festival of colors. You throw colored powder
Mhm.
at each other and stuff. But in the evening, you light a huge bonfire and
Ooh.
kind of have music and dancing and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that like fire night for me, I was like that was very
Mhm.
much like that. I also did a little bit more research into it. So essentially, the festival of Holi. One of the myths surrounding it has to do with Krishna, the god of love, and
Mhm.
Radha, who is like his love.
Mhm.
Krishna has blue skin. It sounds weird to
Okay.
say, but the god has blue skin, and
Yeah.
apparently he was a little bit self-conscious about the fact that he had blue skin, and Radha did not have blue skin. She had like fair skin, essentially.
Okay.
And so
Mhm.
when he was talking about these concerns to his mother said, "Why don't you use this night and take colored paint and paint each other's faces the same color so that there's no difference between you?" And that's actually something that I don't think I had ever actually known that, but
Mm.
because I am Hindu, so we celebrate Holi, but that's not something that we ever really did. But I thought that that was a really sweet thing, and then it kind of reminds me of like the painting. I mean,
Yeah.
very loosely. The one that was the most similar, though, it's called um, Ostara. It's a pagan celebration of spring equinox.
Mhm.
The symbols of this celebration are spring flowers, fairies, butterflies, rabbits, and eggs. So obviously you have like, spring, Easter comes from that
Yeah.
as well. But the spring flowers and the fairies, it's supposed to celebrate the awakening of the earth and supposed to bring out balance, renewal, and a rebirth. So that kind of ties into the whole, coupling, rebirthing of magic.
Yes.
And there's also apparently a whole thing where they choose a man and a woman to play the god and goddess of spring and act out their courtship, which is a little reminiscent of the hunter and the maiden.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure she definitely drew a lot of inspiration from those.
I think
Yeah.
so as well. And
Yeah.
then for summer solstice, they talk about the will o' the wisps. So I looked it up.
Hmm. Mhm.
I am familiar with will o' the wisps, but I
Mhm.
wanted to do like just a little bit of research into it. So they are also called ghost lights, but they're
Hmm.
these like essential balls of light that are fabled to appear to travelers at night, and if you follow them, they draw you away from the safe path. So they're like mischievous, devilish little creatures
Yes.
in our world, but it makes sense that in Prithian they would just be a beautiful sight to enjoy
Mhm.
because no one's that dumb.
I will also point out that the only reason I know of Will-O-the-Wisp is because of Brave
Yes,
from
yes,
Disney. That's the only
brave.
reason.
Although she follows them not to total danger, she follows them to kind of danger, but also to her salvation in the end.
Yes, but yes, yeah.
So,
Gosh.
but yeah, so that was like I was so excited about that. I really enjoyed seeing the different festivals. I like that we saw both the festivals in such a short amount of time as well.
I was thinking about that. Like, I've read these before. I don't think I realized like I think that's why like in the beginning when we talked about like most of these books pacing moves pretty quickly in
Hmm.
time, which is why when she said it's only been a week, I was like, that doesn't feel right. Like,
Yeah.
because I feel like large swaths of time happen. Yeah, I mean, that was 5 chapters. I mean, within 5 chapters, we'd moved an entire season.
Yep. Shall we talk about new characters that have been introduced?
Yes, we can. Who was it? Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yes. We don't know this person's name, but the stranger.
The stranger, this extremely dangerous, powerful, dark, super hot stranger.
That's like literally wrapped in nighttime. Like she like I don't think I mentioned it directly in the description, but like she literally talks about him like being night itself. Like he is darkness and night.
Yeah. Yes, he is darkness and night. Very intriguing gentleman there. I get the sense that he is a little violent,
Mm-hmm.
but very like suave.
Like I think if he lived in the real world, he's like the mafia boss, right? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
were doing
Mm-hmm.
that situation, like mafia boss, bike leader, but he's a little more like suave. So I feel like it would be like the mafia boss
Yeah,
situation.
absolutely. Um, let's talk about the whole broom closet in pockets between worlds.
Yes.
Um, this has potential for spoiler content, but will be very vague, so there's not really it's not going to be a spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole pocket between realms, between worlds, it's like a throwaway line. Like he
Mm-hmm.
just says it and we move on. And Feyre doesn't ask any follow-up questions. And
A single
honestly,
one.
the first few times I read the book, I didn't really think too much about it either.
I didn't. Yeah, I agree.
But it has such huge implications for the world that we know of. And like I want them to talk more about it. I wish there was more about it.
I agree. Yeah, it very much is like a. I do think that's like a recurring thing with
Mm-hmm.
Tamlin, and like I think a lot of the times Lucian is left to fill in those gaps,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like he forgets that she doesn't know.
Yes.
He just says them as someone who lives in new cities. This happens to me a lot. People will just say things and assume that you know what they're talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're like, I have no context
That's
for
so
any of
true.
that. But it's like I feel like a lot of the time, like even with the Great Right, like when she got more information, it was from Lucian,
Yeah.
not from Tamlin.
Yeah. Which
So
okay, which brings me to that point. Like why I get why Lucian's mad that Farah hasn't listened to anyone, and he's also like scared for her and for
yeah,
himself. But
yeah,
like, does he not? Like, no one explained what was going to happen. And they're all
yes.
constantly baffled that she's not listening to them. I wouldn't listen either. I have no idea what's happening.
My assumption, and I don't think we get into this like with them necessarily, but like so Feyre has like expectations of what fairies are. If especially with like the autumn court and with the spring court, if the only interactions that anyone in that has ever had with humans was as slaves, they're just going to assume of you obey without question.
That's
I tell you and you're
true.
just going to do it. Like I really think that's a lot, especially with Tamlin. I think that's very much how he was raised. I think Lucian like is a little bit different because he's seeing her. I think is more of a well-rounded. Like he calls her
Mm-hmm.
Fae by the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
like as that. But I think they're and I also it seems like they're definitely used to just like people conceding to their wishes and
Yeah,
like if they do it, they
I guess
just
that's
don't.
true, but like, come on.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah,
So
I never
bad.
fully understood why I guess I understand being panicked for somebody and like being dramatic about it, but I also think he should be a lot more understanding that like she very clearly has no idea
Yeah.
what's going. She also can't see everybody, which he
He
knows.
knows this.
He knows that she is literally walking around blind. Like physically, according to them, she's walking around blind,
Yeah.
essentially, which is insane. Yeah, I
Insane.
do love Lucian. He is not. He does bad things. He does dumb things. He does.
It's fine. I love him.
We do love him. I think he tries more than Tamlin to make up for his shortcomings.
Mhm.
I feel like I think he's
Yeah,
more aware of his flaws.
I think so as well.
Yeah.
Also just like there's so many moments in this segment of chapters where I just wrote Lucian pulling a Lumiere LOL because like Lumiere like trying to set the mood and then disappear, like
Oh,
Lucian's like I have stuff to do. I'm gone. Have fun.
peace. Yeah,
Yeah.
just absolutely boogieing it out there all the time. He is very Lumiere. Like you're not wrong.
So Lumiere. I'm so happy about that.
We're really starting to see Tamlin and Feyre's relationship and like connection, kind of like we knew this is what was happening, and like that's we end on them like very clearly, like people call them like I don't know, like DTRs here, but I think this was their like we're a couple moment.
Mm.
Like we're together kind of situation. Like it's an open public thing. We're not gonna like walk around or like we're together now. So like seeing them develop and like it's cute to watch someone like fall in love. Like it's really
It
like that's
is.
why we read. I mean, not really a lot of us, but like that's why I read these things. It's
Mhm.
like watching people fall in love in these like fantasy, wonderful worlds.
Yeah.
And seeing her like being able to trust someone enough to fall in love,
Hmm.
like leaning into that, and like he needs some flirting lessons, but it's working on her, so apparently not. Um,
Yeah.
that's what she needs, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
And in terms of like what she needs, this whole thing, it's just like after Cal and Mai for the next, for the next however many chapters, you just get this feeling of like Tamlin is taking care of her. Like she's
mhm,
safe and secure and she's painting and she feels
mhm.
hope and happiness and like she's rounded out because she's eating well. She's not stressed out anymore. It's just like a very safe, it feels like a very safe, cozy segment of chapters.
It does. Yeah, this seems like where it's kind of like building and like you I think you can get the sense that she's settling in.
Hmm.
Like she really only talks about her family once in it. And I think that's reasonable being like, yeah, like
Yeah.
when these like holidays come up, you're gonna think of your family.
Hmm.
It just is what's gonna happen. But she seems very like comfortable and like she's growing in confidence. She's like, I'm beautiful. Like I
Hmm.
am she's like, I may not be the most attractive person. I bookmarked it at one point. I don't need to necessarily go back and look at it now, but she talks about how like when she's looking at herself like in the dress, she was like, I see my eyes. I don't see my mother's. I don't see Nesta's. I see
Yes.
mine. And I think that was like a really big, like
Big moment.
big moment for her. And I also think it might be a turning moment for Tamlin a little bit as well, because when like you're comfortable and confident with yourself, it's gonna be a lot easier to like love or become attached to
Hmm.
that. I don't know if they're in love yet. Literally for that. Fairy seems like
They're
she's going in
they're
that direction.
crushing hard on each other.
They got real big. I think maybe lustful love, maybe a little more less love at this point.
Yeah. It's like
Some
there's lust
sexual
and they
tension.
also care for each other.
They do, yeah. Like, there's some emotional connection there. It's they're in the early dating stages.
Yeah.
It's just what it is.
Yeah,
But
it's comforting. I love it.
yeah. Hmm.
All right, do we want to talk about Beauty and the Beast comparisons now?
Yes, we can.
All right.
I feel like there was so the Lumiere stuff.
Hmm.
The main one that I thought of, which is kind of also like a pivotal point in Beauty and the Beast, but she did it differently, is the long table thing. Because they do sit on the opposite ends of
Hmm.
the table, and eventually she goes and like sits next
Yeah.
to the Beast. She used magic to make the table shorter
Yeah.
to do it, which is kind of fun. That was the main one that I like saw.
So just now when we were talking about her settling in and, all of that, this
Mhm.
song Something There where they're like throwing
Yes.
snowballs at each other and it's cute and Mrs. Potts and Lumiere and Cogsworth they're like there's something
Mhm.
there that wasn't there before.
Yes.
Doo-doo-doo. Um
100% yes.
that yeah, that's like basically I think what this segment of chapters is. It's like they're if this was a musical, that would be what this was.
I do kind of picture Alice. We talked about wanting a novel of Alice and Lucian adventures.
Yes.
I know that's not technically canon, but in my brain, I picture them spying on them all the
Oh,
time,
yes.
like hiding in
Yes.
the bushes and being like, particularly because like Alice absolutely yanks her to change her before she sees them in that scene. So like they're very clearly like keeping an eye, being like
Absolutely.
they getting together. Apparently Tamlin can't see her covered in paint. Apparently that is not attractive, but
Sure.
uh, apparently Alice is like, no, get together.
I think it was like the first, she was like, the first time he sees you after several days is not gonna be splattered in paint. It's gonna be like, you're gonna like glow and basically look at, as beautiful as a fairy. That's my goal.
Yeah, I also am assuming a little bit. She's like, I have to get ready because this is my festival because I am a summer person. So I'm gonna get you ready so I can get ready.
Mm, I
I'm
love
sure they would like
that.
that. But
Probably. Okay, I have a theory.
Yes, ma'am. I'm excited about
So
this.
Alice is Mrs. Potts.
Yes.
Lucian is Lumiere.
Mhm.
Tamlin is the Beast slash Cogsworth, which I still
Yeah,
think is absolutely hilarious, and Farah is
I
Belle.
agree.
I think we've met Gaston.
Ooh.
And I think Gaston is this random fey male who's dark and
Oh,
dangerous and
yeah.
absolutely the most beautiful man she's ever seen. Um, and so like go along with me here, right? Because like we talked a little bit about how whereas in Beauty and the Beast, Belle comes from a normal, warm, pleasant
Mhm.
village and goes to this dark, desolate, bleak castle. And
Mhm.
in this book it's the opposite. So
Mhm.
I think that there's both parallels and also opposites drawn between this person or this
Mhm.
this female and Gaston. Gaston is supposed to be really beautiful.
He is supposed to be the most attractive man in the village. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he's supposed to be just like absolutely like so. He's supposed to be hot and a beast.
He is supposed to be both. Yes.
Yes, and I get that vibe from this man. This man,
Mm.
every word she uses to describe him is like hot, hot, hot.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, this is I if like in old school animation, the little awuga eyes, if that was a thing, that would be Pharaoh's eyes
Yes,
in this section.
I think so as well.
Yeah.
And then like Gaston is a villain. Um, this guy, we don't know what he is. We've only met him once.
Mhm.
I would assume we're gonna meet him again, but he has that danger. He feels dangerous.
So I think it's safe to assume that they talk about he looks like Night, right?
Yes.
We know later that the Night Court is probably not great. I think we can probably make some assumptions that he's
He's
probably
probably
from the
from the
Night
Night
Court.
Court. Yeah,
Yeah, like
I
I
would
don't
say
think that
so.
I think that's supposed to be a connection that you're
Yeah.
supposed to have in that section. So he's from the like, according to Tamlin and Lucian, like the worst
Hmm.
court. Like they play. I mean, they kill
Like,
people for fun.
yeah,
So
kill people, deliver their heads on a spike, so on and so
mm,
forth. But I do think that this person, this female, is Gaston. He's our Gaston.
I like because he's also like again in the animated thing. I don't know if I've ever read the book for Beauty and the Beast, but like in the animated series is what I'm thinking of is like the dark hair with the broad
Hmm.
chest and
Hmm.
like all of that things. Yeah, I think he's
And
supposed
like
to
the
be. I
swagger,
agree.
like Gaston, like he's
Yeah.
not animated. He's not made to be attractive in the Disney movie because he's supposed to be like the villain, but he
Hmm.
has this like swagger that you
Yeah.
can't deny, and this female very much has the same thing.
I agree. He definitely has that like oh what like he walks up with his hands in his pockets
Hmm.
kind of vibe and just like saunters in a little bit and he's
Yeah.
just like he's like when you're 1921 and you want to which she is
Hmm.
and you want to date the man that like seems a little dangerous because he seems fun like
Yes,
that's what he is 100%.
absolutely. And then just like, yeah, like swaggering up, and then like you get the feeling that he knows how beautiful he is too.
Oh yeah, no, he knows he's hot
Yeah. So,
100%.
anyways, that's my theory. I think we've met Gaston.
I love that. I now can only picture that man eating 12 eggs a day, 12 dozen
Oh
eggs
my
a day.
God. All right. Are they hot or are they a beast?
Oh, Webba. Let's go.
Let's go. Okay, Tamlin, full on beast in this segment.
But like he's well, if you're Feyre, kind of hot.
But that's hot, yeah.
Yeah, she likes the hot beast. So I guess to Feyre, he's both.
Yeah. To Farah,
I
he's
would say
both.
to me, he's just a beast. To be
Yeah.
honest,
Until
um,
like the last chapter, until chapter 25, when he's so hot.
that has to make himself less hot to be normal.
Yeah.
um, it's hard to deny. I will say.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree.
Yeah. Lucian, just hot again.
That man is. He can throw me over like a sack of potatoes any day. Like
That was
he
a
is.
little beastly. A
It
little
was
bit of
a
the
little like
beast.
for him because he's so like typically I think really put together and like courtly and like
Yeah.
understands all of the rules he's supposed to follow and he's just like I truly don't have time to deal with you right now. Like I'm just gonna absolutely hoof you into this manner, which we also don't know how far away she's come. Like it's probably like a good distance,
That's
right?
true.
So he's like literally just
Yeah.
long-term,
Also,
like
she describes it, he's not walking, he's like sprinting, like at a dead sprint with her back to the house.
which is a little hot, I'm gonna be honest.
Pretty it's pretty hot.
It's pretty hot. So yeah, I would say Lucian is just hot with like momentary flashes of a little bit of a beast.
Yes.
But in general, I would say that's the Fae element to
Mhm.
him that like pops out at
Yeah.
times. So
Feyre, I think that we have kind of the opposite for her. She goes from being a little beastly to I think she's just hot in this section.
she's just hot. She's an artist. She's
Mhm.
doing the hot artist thing, you
Yeah.
know? Like I picture her with like paintbrushes stuck in her like hair that she's pulled up and like splattered in paint
Yeah,
and
and then you have like her like paint going when she's for those of you who are not watching but only listening, I'm like pushing my bangs back from my face, but
uh-huh.
like covered in paint. So there's just like paint in her hair and on her forehead too.
Uh-huh. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she's like that like kind of I think she wants to be that kind of like hippie artist type
Mhm.
situation. I think she's like coming into that
Yes.
a little bit with all of her like flowy springtime. Although they do say it's chiffon, which is a little bit fancy for a hippie person, but like flowy chiffon
This is true.
dresses. But
All
yes, she
right.
is just pretty. Yeah.
Just pretty. Yep. Ah, and our nameless Gaston, obviously both.
Oh yeah, he's 100% both. Yeah. Yeah. No,
A well
he's.
balanced both.
I agree. Like he's one of those people that like he's so attractive, but you're afraid of him a
Yeah.
little bit at the same time. That you're like, I don't know what to do with these emotions.
Yeah.
Like you scare me, but you're pretty.
Yeah.
If you want it.
Let's go with Farah's Dumb first. Welcome to Farah's Dumb.
Welcome. Yes. I will say she's less dumb in this section.
Yeah.
I think her reactions are fair. My main qualm is that this girl does not ask questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like Farah is not dumb. She actually shows herself to be like a very well-rounded, you know, person in these chapters except that she doesn't ask questions. She just wonders.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I wonder what that is, or like, I wonder why this is. And some of it, I'm sure, is like because I do think she's tried asking, like, she tries asking about the blight. I will give her
Yeah.
credit, and they're turning her down on those things. But I feel like there's other things that, like, with the magic elements, or
Mhm.
like why she can't be at this right. That I feel like she, like, the questions that I think she should be asking, she just isn't.
Yeah. Agreed. Come on, Farah.
Like, she's so curious and interested in things. Like, I mean, she made a whole map of this castle.
Mhm.
So it just seems like to me she's just kind of like that whole like stay with the High Lord
Mhm.
thing. She's like, I'm just gonna. I mean, she
Yeah.
says that she's like, I'm just gonna stay with him.
And she
Like
does
that's what
keep
I was
saying
told.
that too.
Yeah.
Stay with the
She's
High
like,
Lord.
I'm doing what I'm told. Kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I and then Tamlin, Tam Tam is dumb.
He's another one of those people that like I want. Like he's also hot and dumb. Like he's so attractive. You want to like overlook. Like he has great qualities and like he
Mhm.
seems caring and that he cares for the people around him. Glamoring, where she can't see anything, is so
It's
baffling. Like
so bad.
she like brushes it off as like I'm a scared human. She's gonna be a scared human either way.
Yep.
Like that's not changing. Can you imagine the amount of times Farrah's like picked her nose or like done something embarrassing in front of people without knowing?
Yeah.
Like
It's like my worst nightmare.
it is my worst nightmare. Like I also I'm assuming like they're having to move out of her way this whole time for her not to know, or
Right.
like is she has she run into people and just thought she was really clumsy and just fell over air? Like
So many questions come to mind.
I am upset about it. I even the first time I read this through, I remember being irate
Yes. That's
about
the
it.
perfect word.
Yeah, like so upset, and like especially with the way that Lucian and Tamlin just laughed it off like it was nothing. And now she's just like a dumb little human, and I'm like, she's not just a dumb little human. Like you, especially when he tried to gaslight her into saying it was because she was human and not because he did it to her.
No.
He said it's because your human senses are dulled. It wasn't because she was a human, it's because he was doing it to her.
Mhm. constant
And I
smell
ain't
of
mad about
magic in the air. That's why things like lighting candles and creating pockets in between worlds. That's why it was so draining because he has been glamoring her the entire time heavily.
that. Mhm. Heavily. Yeah. I Yeah, well, then he also, like, goes on to explain that, like, he's like, "Well, I'm only doing it for my court. Like, if they're not from my court, it's not happening," which I also wonder if that's a little bit why she, like, found that stranger so attractive. Because, like, it seems like both
Mm.
Lucian and Tamlin are, like, glamoring themselves to, like, look less hot. I do
Oh,
not think the stranger is. The stranger is like, "You will see me in my full glory. You will
yes.
see how attractive I
Very
am."
Gaston of him.
Very guest on of him. He's like, "I'm hot and I know it," and he's like, "I don't gotta glamour myself. I am perfectly fine. I am capable."
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was a lot of the, like, I mean, that would be, like, shocking to suddenly see someone with so much, like, radiance, and you've been
Mhm.
in this kind of, like, well, it would be like wearing, like, rose-tinted glasses and then suddenly, like, having them removed, and you're like, "Wow, this is so different."
Yes. That's a very good point. Other ways that Tam Tam is dumb, but like mostly just like underestimating Feyre. He doesn't think she can
Okay.
handle the truth of fairies, so he hides it
Yeah.
from her. Then he doesn't want her to help with whatever blight is happening because he says that she won't survive. But as we said, she already killed two Naga and she has been fighting for survival. Like maybe you
Mhm.
don't yeah, she's not a fairy, but she's already proved that she's scrappy and she can defend herself. Maybe let
Mhm.
her help. Clearly she wants to.
Well, it's yeah, like, it she wants to, and it seems like, I would assume there's, like, a judgmental element of it if everyone else, like, even Alice is there
Mm-hmm.
to help.
Yep.
And so, like, if they're just like, "We're just only working for this dumb human that sits and paints all day," like, I'm sure she's feeling that. Like,
Yeah.
we're in a war, like, something is happening. I'm not just gonna sit here
Mm-hmm.
to, like, be a lawn ornament and paint kind of
Yes.
thing.
Yeah.
That's just not who she is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's dumb for like underestimating her a little bit. Which also
Agree.
brings us back to Twilight.
This There is some parallels
There are
here.
some parallels here because like Edward Cullen constantly underestimates Bella.
Tamlin is very Edward coded. I
Yes,
will
he
be honest.
is. He's that like angsty, dark, gloomy, hates himself, but you don't know why, hates everything else a little bit
Mhm.
too. But like constantly underestimating this woman that he claims to care for. If you care for somebody and everyone else can tell that they're intelligent and capable of things, you should not be constantly underestimating them.
I agree. Your big broody manness does not override her capability.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a strong independent woman, damn it.
She literally kept herself alive from the age of 14.
Yes, exactly.
We like him. We do.
We do.
But we're upset with him. I think
Yes.
we're supposed to like him. We're
Yes.
supposed to like him. Feyre likes him. He is not my preference
No.
by any means.
Nor
But
mine. Nor mine. I can like very honestly, truthfully say the first time I read this book, I was like, uh, like I don't like. I'm glad that she likes him. It's like having a friend fall
mm,
in love with somebody that you're like, I guess he's not the worst, but you're trying to be supportive.
you're like, you could do better, but like you could also do worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Although, like, I will
I
say the scene with the sorry,
oh, go ahead.
the scene with the on the hill with the will o' the wisps and all of that, like, it was so sweet. I was like, okay, I understand that whole thing was very attractive, very sweet.
By that point in the book is where I was like, okay, like this clearly is something. Like he
Mhm.
seems to fit well for her. She seems happy. She feels safe. Like all of the things that I think do make a healthier relationship. Even though he did manhandle her like a month or two before, which is not my favorite.
It was kind of
Um,
hot, but that's fine.
it was kind of hot, but like no prior consent into that. So that's
Yeah,
I don't know. I guess
it's a gray
I guess if I
area.
think that being picked up like a sack of potatoes is attractive, I can say that that can
Exactly.
also be attractive. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it was very apparent. That was a complicated situation, I will say. But I do remember reading that part of it the first time and me being like, I don't know, because we get that and then the glamour thing like back to
I
back,
know. Yeah, that is a rough
and you're like,
segment for Tamlin.
yeah, like, are we supposed to like this guy? And like, we are clearly, but I guess it's just like him, but like opening up. I guess in theory
Hmm.
is what it's supposed to be, but like, not the brightest opening up part.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, damn. Yeah, concluding thoughts. So much happened in this segment. Wow.
it did. I just forget how, like, fast paced isn't the right word, because like I wouldn't necessarily say this section was fast paced. It's just so much information is
Mhm.
crammed into this that you just have like a lot to consume and like process.
Yeah, agreed. I really enjoyed these chapters.
Mhm.
I think the festivals like Mai and the summer
Yeah,
solstice are so cool. Those are
I
the
agree.
kind of things that make me wish that I could be. Well, Mai maybe not so much. I like the fires and the drums. But
You
like
don't want to
summer solstice,
participate in calamine or
nah, I'm good. That's a little too fake for me.
fair.
But summer solstice and then like the wine and the dancing and
Yeah,
the fiddles, fiddles, the will o' the wisps.
Mad Fiddle Man.
Man, yeah. Yeah, it was really I really enjoyed this segment.
Yeah, I did too. It was very fun to read. Loved being able to do the chapter like recaps over it. I was like, oh, like this is just a fun, like happy section. We finally see Feyre happy,
Yes.
which is really lovely to
It
see
is
for her.
lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it for our episode this time. Next episode, we're going to be going over chapters 26 through 30 of A Court of Thorns and Roses. So read up on those, and we'll see you next time.
See y'all.
Bye. Hi, me again. I am here to let you all know where to find us. You can find us on Instagram at BookWitchesPod. You can find us on Spotify at BookWitches with a B. You can find us on YouTube at BookWitches with a B, and you can find us on TikTok at BookWitchesPod. All of this information is also going to be listed below our episode, and it's going to be listed in the ending credits if you're watching along with us in the videos. Catch you guys soon!